Hello, hello, hello. Here's an ultimate guide on Shroud routes and Elixir wells and Enshrouded. Keep in mind that I will demonstrate how to get there by gliding to Shroud routes and through Elixir wells, and I would not advise doing that on a lower level because you might end up in the midst of enemies that will most likely overpower you. I'm doing it just to illustrate how to get there and just to show exactly where a certain shroud route is. If you follow this guide as you level, you will accumulate all the skill points that you can possibly get, and you will get an extremely powerful character. First Elixir Well is the one that you will be unable to skip because you'll have to do it as you progress through the main storyline. It's located near the starting area. It's very straightforward, and the only thing that's worth mentioning at a lower level, I would advise getting a really decent weapon against this mini boss. Alternatively, you can use the guides that I made earlier on how to get very powerful legendary weapons at the early game. And it should not be otherwise very difficult to defeat that boss, and you get your first Shroud route. The layout of the Elixir Well is fairly straightforward compared to the ones you'll encounter in the future, and all you have to do is just descend it and you'll be able to see the mini boss straight away. Also, you can glide to Elixir Well from the starting area or from the Ancient Spire. It's extremely easy to reach, and it's very easy to clear and obtain your skill points from chopping down the Shroud route. The next Shroud route is near the Ancient Spire in Springlands, and all you have to do is glide down from the Ancient Spire into the side of a cliff. Just keep an eye out for it. Be careful. It's easy to miss it, and you should be able to find it quite easily. Even though, if you will glide in there, you should be extra careful because there are going to be, as always, several enemies near the Shroud Root that you have to kill before you can chop down the Shroud Root itself. And for anyone just starting out, I would recommend getting a glider as soon as possible because it will make your traveling much faster and will enable you to reach certain destinations much easier. The next Elixir Well is located close by to the Ancient Spire as well. It's on the western side of the hill, and also you can glide down in there. It's in the Shroud, so keep that in mind, especially if you're starting. You will be able to reset your Shroud meter at the checkpoint at the top of the Elixir Well, but you should be prepared to fight your way through the Elixir Well, and it's considerably longer than the first Elixir Well. There are going to be a bunch of mobs. In this demonstration, I'm gliding right to the Shroud route. However, I would not recommend doing that if you're at a low level and you're just starting out. I would rather recommend fighting gradually through the Elixir Well, killing all the mobs just to be safe. Because, as I mentioned before, if you glide to the Shroud route, you are very likely to get attacked by a large number of enemies. If you're on a high level, of course, it's fine. Like they're negligible and it's very easy to kill them if you're on a high level. But I would advise caution for anyone watching that guide and trying it at lower levels. The next Shroud route is located at the southern part of the map, at the southernmost border of the map, and you will not be able to get there from the start because you will have to upgrade your flame in order to get there. Keep in mind that all of the Shroud routes are located in the Shroud, and you will have to upgrade your flame gradually to get to all of them. But I would not recommend going for Shroud routes and Elixir wells by themselves. This is something that should go gradually as you level up, as you get better gear, and as you upgrade your flame. And flame is obviously quintessential to exploring the Shroud at any stage of the game. The next Shroud route is located at the northern part of Springlands map, and it's at the northern part of Enshrouded area, and I would recommend gliding there. Of course, you can glide directly in the Shroud route, or you can glide near it, but you'll have to get in the Shroud, and it's located on a certain ledge. and you'll have to get there one way or another. Of course, it will be surrounded by enemies, but it's kind of in the hill itself, so you have to like get into that location carefully, but you'll have to get there. The next Shroud route is to the east of the starting location. It's on the southern part of the map as well. However, I would advise a lot of caution in there because it's surrounded by Shroud magma. And if you, for some unfortunate reason, get in there, it will be extremely hard to get out of it. It's a material that probably the deadliest in the game, so I would advise a lot of caution when traversing near it or flying across it. So be extremely careful. And it's on the island located on that magma river. And yeah, you should be extremely careful because if you land on that magma, you're probably gone. You have a chance of getting out of there, but you should be extremely careful in there. The next Shroud route is located in the Ring of Rot. It's in a slightly northern part of Springlands, and by itself, it's not a very extraordinary location. It's just a plain Shroud route under the open air. It's not in a cave or in any kind of elixir well, and you should be able to walk in there or glide in there, whatever is more convenient at your stage. And it's, as always, surrounded by enemies. You should be able to chop it down, and it's quite accessible from the second Springlands ancient spires that you'll discover in your travels. You can glide there or directly, or you can glide near it and get to it by entering the shroud and chopping it down eventually. Keep in mind there's a Fell Thunderbrute and Banshee, so at lower level I would advise taking them out one by one, and they might be a little bit of a challenge for you. The next Elixir Well is located just east of the second Springland Spire, and you will start feeling a little bit of a challenge when you get through that Elixir Well. There is a Fell Thunderbrute guarding the Shroud Route itself. There is several new types of monsters in there, particularly the flowers that will shoot those tiny little bombs at you. So I would advise definitely a lot of caution. I would advise clearing it gradually. And again, in a demonstration, I just glided in there and killed everything. But I would advise clearing out those flowers and then tackling the Thunderbrute. And yeah, you start to feel a little bit of a challenge in there, especially if you're at lower levels. And as before, if you're new to the game, I advise gradual exploration, leveling up and gearing up, uh, and then getting to Elixir Wells and Shroud Routes. Elixir Wells will gradually become one of the toughest challenges in the game. So I would not advise taking them lightly. I would advise being prepared for them. And sometimes, if you don't feel like you can tackle it, I advise getting to higher level or getting better gear and coming back to explore it. Like it's not going anywhere. If you cannot clear it straight away, you can always come back for it later. It doesn't really matter. That's no one is forcing you to get all of the elixir wells or shroud routes straight away from the start. The next shroud route is located at the southern part of the map of Springlands map, and it's a little bit tricky. First of all, you'll have to get there carefully. You have to find the location, which is not super easy to find, and it's not something that you will come across in your travels. And on top of it, it's in a bit of a castle fortification. And if you're gradually clearing it, just keep in mind that you have to get to that point where the shroud route is. And it might be a little bit confusing at the start. And as you can see in this demonstration in here, you have to travel quite a bit just to get to the shroud route. So it's quite far from the ancient Spar Springlands. It's on the border, far away from everything. So I would, on top of it, advise having a considerable capacity to spend your time in a shroud if you're not gliding in there. If you're gliding in there, be careful not to glide in any monsters, because that's a bit of a kind of stumbling stone that you get when you're gliding into the shroud. You can accidentally land near a lot of monsters, and you'll have to defeat them quite fast because you'll be in unfamiliar area and you have to survive in there on top of everything. The next Elixir well is somewhere closer to Revelwood. It's in northwestern part of the map, of the Springlands map, and I'm getting there from Springlands Ancient Spire. But keep in mind that monsters in there are a little bit higher level, and the Shroud route itself is guarded by a felt underbrute. It seems like it's quite easy to get there as I glide in there, but again, clearing the area gradually is the best course of action for a lower level player, lower level character, and getting there, you can glide in there, you can walk in there. It's a bit of a glide from Springlands Ancient Spire, and in all the demonstrations, I have the best glider in the game, so I can get there quite easily. If you cannot get exactly to Elixir well, you can glide on the hill to the left and then gradually descend there. No rush, and no one is expecting you to have an extremely good glider while exploring those shroud routes or Elixir wells. So take your time, get there carefully, and don't rush trying to get to the Shroud route at the end of Elixir well. Just make sure you clear everything and you can get there safely. The next Shroud route is north of Springlands Ancient Spire and south of Revelwood Ancient Spire. It's to the west of Alchemist Tower that you'll come across in your quests. And this Shroud route is guarded by a bunch of wildlife. It's in a cavern, and you will not have to fight a lot of Shroud monsters. You will have to fight several bats and boars, and generally it's not that difficult to get in there. And a lot of the area is not even covered by the Shroud, so that's quite an original location for the Shroud route itself. There's going to be quite a few bugs, Shroud bugs, in the area near the Shroud route itself, but otherwise it's fairly easy to get there. You just need to find the cave itself, and it's not that difficult to clear it by itself. Even though, of course, the level of NPCs of the mobs will be a little bit higher because we're getting near the Revelwood. The next Elixir well is also near the border of Revelwood. It's on the east from Alchemist Tower, and it's in the demonstration, it's not that difficult to get to the Shrouded in Elixir well. However, keep in mind that at lower level, you'll probably have to clear all of it. And there is also a Banshee at the end of it near the Shroud route. So on top of the Banshee, you'll also have the normal Shroud zombies attacking you. Again, I would advise clearing it gradually, not rushing at it at all. If you're at lower level, be careful because there are higher levels already. We're approaching Rubberwood, and all of the monsters will gradually get higher level, and things will gradually get more difficult the further you progress in the game. The next Elixir well is further down east. It's also at the border between Springlands and Revelwood. However, this one is harder to get to. It's quite far from both Ancient Spires in Springlands and quite far from Revelwood Ancient Spire as well. And you will feel a bit of a higher difficulty because the level of the monsters is there is higher, but you will also encounter a new type of enemy, a new type of boss enemy on top of everything, which is a Bug Queen, and you will get a ton of bugs on top of her in the fight. She's quite slow, and it's not too difficult to kill her because of this slowness. But be careful not to get overwhelmed with all the bugs that surround her. So this is a slightly more of a challenge compared to the previous one, but as before, Elixir Wells will gradually provide a more challenging fights and more challenging encounters as you progress in the game. The next Shroud route is in a bit of a tricky location. It's on the westernmost side of the Revelwood map, southern part of Revelwood map at least, and just look carefully for the cave at the bottom of a certain chasm, a certain ravine, and a cliff. I'd say at the western part. It can be a little bit tricky to find it, but once you get in there, you'll see the familiar shrouded lava that you have to avoid at all costs, and a bunch of shroud monsters. Nothing too extraordinary, but the only trick is finding the location precisely, and it's a cave at the lowest level of the cliff on the western side. So just look carefully, and you should be able to find it. The next shroud route is also in the cave, and it's also the western part of Railroad map, slightly more north, and it's in an enshrouded area. Look carefully for that cave because if you're in a shroud, your vision kind of gets foggy because there's a lot of shroud fog in there, so it might be hard to find it in the first place. But again, look carefully. It's on the western hill. You should be able to find it. And once you get in there, you can go slowly. You'll have to descend in a certain abandoned mine looking area, and there's nothing too extraordinary in terms of shroud monsters. Of course, things will get more difficult the further we progress, so the level of the monsters will increase. So keep that in mind if you're just new to the game, and you should be comfortable fighting monsters in Revelwood if you're trying to get shroud roots and elixir wells in Revelwood, because also there's a bug queen in here which you can kill, or well, in my case, I just skipped her all entirely. The next elixir well is to the east of Revelwood Ancient Spire, and you should keep two things in mind. First of all, you have to be able to travel a considerable distance in the Shroud or approach it from the northern side. If you can just glide there and get there from that northernmost side, but you'll have to glide directly into Elixir Well, so there can be quite a few monsters in there in the first place. And second, there's two mini bosses, Fell Thunder Brutes, which can be a bit of a challenge, and they have a tendency of attacking you at once. Two of them will attack you at once. There's a huge probability, so you should be prepared for that elixir well. It's not going to be easy, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And again, if you don't feel like you can handle it, you can always come back to it later. There's no rush, no rush at all in this game at all whatsoever. The next Shroud route is northeast of Revelwood Ancient Spire, and the trick in there, first of all, you have to get there, and you'll have to fight through Fell Thunderbrute and a bunch of Shroud zombies, etc. If you're traversing through the Shroud, you should be able to travel for so long. Again, you can always jump to it from the edge of the shroud or near the shroud. You can approach it in several ways. And another part that can be a bit tricky is getting across those beams to that island. And keep in mind, if you fall down, you fall into shroud lava. The next shroud route is in the ruins of a castle that you will have to get to while doing the quest. So eventually you will get there in any case, and there is actually two shroud routes in that area. They're not that difficult to approach, but keep in mind they're always surrounded by a bunch of enemies. The first one is guarded by Fell Thunderbrute, and there is a lot of zombies in there. And if you're using a ranged class like I do, keep in mind there's a lot of walls, corridors, and all this kind of thing. So you are fighting it in a more confined space than the usual elixir well. So there's not a lot of room for you to move around. There's not a lot of movement you can do. So you should be extremely careful while dealing with it. I would advise, in my case, I use the staff to just kill everything from a certain distance, certain range, and just go there carefully. kill everything from afar, clear everything, and then only get to the Shroud route, because things can jump on you from all sides, and they can overwhelm you quite easily, not leaving you a lot of room to get out of there because there's walls and buildings all around you. So be careful. The next Shroud route is the first one in Nomad's Highlands, and of course, as before, you should be comfortable fighting monsters in Nomad's Highlands before you get to the Shroud route. And this one is somewhat similar to what we've seen before. You have to jump in there and get on a certain ledge in a hole in the ground. And I would advise getting out of there by teleporting out of it, because if you descend further down, you'll end up in a huge shrouded area, which is very big, and there's not a lot of ways to get out of there. So my advice would be, if you're going for the shroud route, make sure you can teleport back to Ancient Spire, and you're not losing a lot of progress by exploring or anything. So just get in there and teleport out. That's the best way to handle it and to do it. The next Shroud route is somewhat similar to the previous one in Nomad's Highlands, though in this case there's gonna be a Fell Thunder Brute that you have to fight. Also, I would advise teleporting out of there because you end up pretty much in the same area, even though you're a bit closer to any ramps or in any ways to get out of there. I would still strongly advise just teleporting out of there and making sure you can clear all of it, because there's going to be Felt Underbrute, there's going to be quite a few Shroud zombies and other stuff attacking you. Be extremely careful. You can shoot at them from afar. You don't have to jump in there straight away, and there's, of course, multiple way to approach it and to clear it. This next Shroud route is at the northern part of Nomad's Highlands. It's not that hard to see it because you will see a just certain red and greenish glow from the cave, and that's where you need to go, especially if you're gliding in there. It should not be way too difficult to spot it. Keep in mind that you'll obviously have to fight a few monsters to clear it, but otherwise, it's fairly straightforward. It's not far from Ancient Spire and Nomad's Highlands, and you should not have a lot of problems with it if you can handle most things in Nomad's Highlands. As always, keep in mind that if you cannot get into a certain shrouded area, you should always upgrade your flame level. And I would advise prioritizing upgrading your flame as you progress through the game. As you can see, the next shroud route is also the northern part of Nomad's Highlands. However, it's in a hole in the ground. As the first ones, you'll have to get there by gliding in there, and you'll have a checkpoint on top of Elixir well, so you can always teleport out of it. And again, I would probably advise teleporting out of it once you're done with it. There is a typical Elixir well layout. You have to clear a bunch of monsters in order to get there. There's quite a few of them. Keep in mind that we're dealing with a higher level of monsters compared to previous areas. So if you're at low level, you should be comfortable fighting things in Nomad's Highlands and expect even more of a challenge because it's an Elixir well and there's higher density of monsters in there. In the area itself, there's gonna be several spawn points for zombies that you'll have to destroy. So keep in mind you can definitely get overwhelmed. And at lower level, I would advise gradually clearing the area all entirely before approaching Shroud route to chop it down. The next Shroud route is more tricky to find. It's sort of in a hole, as previously you'll have to glide into that hole, but look carefully. Like, there's a reason why I'm showing all of it to you, because this one is in a cave in that hole, and there's quite a few caves in there, and you'll have to get a specific one with a Shroud route. So be careful, don't rush, look carefully, and you should be able to find the Shroud route in there. As always, it's guarded, and as previously mentioned, I would probably advise teleporting out of it because getting stuck in there in those shrouded areas in Nomad's Highlands underground is not the best idea, and it's not that good at all if you don't know the way out of it. The next Shroud route is in the midst of Umber Hollow, near the center of it, and by itself, it's not that difficult to get in there. However, you're gliding into an area in the middle of a shroud, so you will definitely get attacked by a lot of monsters in there. So if you're lower level, I would advise getting there very carefully because there's a lot of dangerous shroud zombies. Some of them even have shields and are more difficult to kill. But otherwise, you can teleport out of it. You can get out of that shrouded area normally. It's slightly easier than most underground areas in the shrouds that we came across previously because there's multiple ways to get out of there. The area around Shroud Route itself is quite densely packed, and of course, there are several ways to approach it. You can kill them from afar, but again, you should always be prepared for difficult fights near Shroud Routes and Elixir Wells. So, I would definitely advise going in there prepared. The next Elixir Well is also in Umber Hollow, however, keep in mind that it's not just about getting to that Elixir Well. On top of everything, you'll have to travel through the entire cave system entirely and get to the end of it. And I'm giving you precise demonstration of how can you traverse it, even though I'm skipping a lot of stuff. And if you're at a lower level, it will take you more time to traverse through it. There's quite a lot of monsters. It's a very long underground structure going into cave system, and there's that shroud route in the end, so you should be prepared for this journey adventure, and I'd advise having a lot of time that you can stay in the shroud, uh, having that capacity, having really good gear, and overall you should be quite prepared because it's fairly long, it can be quite challenging, and there's dense pack of monsters that can attack you if you're at a lower level. If you're just in Nomad's Highlands leveling up and doing stuff, you should be prepared for a challenging run in there. On top of it, there is fell monstrosity in there, and also on top of that fell monstrosities, there are going to be a bunch of zombies in there. And if you haven't encountered fell monstrosity and you're just new and you're just leveling, it's a bit of an annoying enemy that has a lot of health, and he has a tendency of spewing shroud bombs, shroud bulbs, however you call them, at you. So he's an enemy that has a lot of health that you should be able to kill, and he can be a bit of a challenge because there's going to be a lot of extra zombies jumping on top of you, a part of that. So be prepared for a boss fight in there overall. The next Shroud route is south of Nomad's Highlands Ancient Spire, and it's just on the east from Umber Hollow. There is going to be kind of a rock formation, we don't even call it a cliff, and you can get inside of it, and there is a shroud route inside of that cliff, giant rock, however you call it. You have to climb a certain section of it, but after you do that, there's no complications. There's quite a few enemies guarding it, nothing extraordinary, but you should be able to find it, and just remember you have to ascend a bit in order to get inside of it. The next shroud route is very easy to find. It's the first one in Kindlewastes. As long as you have discovered Kindlewaste's ancient spire, you can glide down there or near it, clear the area, and chop down the shroud route. It's an enshrouded area, but again, you can teleport out of it as previously, or you can just walk out of it. It's fairly easy to find. Just glide from the ancient spire, and you should be able to get there with no problems whatsoever. The next elixir well is in the northern part of Kindlewastes. There are several ways to get there, and I would advise gliding from nearby cliffs to that elixir well, and you'll have a checkpoint in there so you can heal, you can reset your shroud timer, and you will descend in a certain cavern, and there's going to be a fell monstrosity in there. So be prepared for this, a little bit of a boss fight. If you already killed fell monstrosities in No Man's Highlands, you're not going to see anything new in terms of mechanics. However, I would strongly advise you to be prepared for tackling that monster, because obviously it's higher levels than No Man's Highlands, and it can be a little bit of a challenge. But if you are fine questing, adventuring, and killing monsters in Kindlewastes in every area as it is in Kindlewastes, this should be fine for you. The next Shroud route is on the eastern border of the entire map and of Kindlewastes. You can get there by gliding from Kindlewastes's ancient spire to it, and you can land somewhere near it and then get there gradually. There's not a lot of annoying enemies. There's just one, and it's not a boss. There's flying jellyfish, but you will find a lot of those flying jellyfishes all over the place. And they can be a little bit annoying because they shoot those tiny exploding jellyfishes, which you can shoot down, as a matter of fact. So it's not too bad. You can glide in there, and it's fairly normal shroud route that you can find. The only thing to keep in mind is that it's in a bit of a distant area, so you can always teleport back to Kindlewastes Tension Spire, and that's what I would advise doing a lot of times. You can try walking out of there, it's possible, but I'd say it's a fairly remote area. There's nothing way too interesting a part of the Shroud route in there, so just I'd advise to teleport out of it. There's not much part of Shroud route in there whatsoever. The next Shroud route is southwest of Kindlewastes Ancient Spire. It's in the midst of a shroud, a very dense shrouded area with a lot of monsters, and there's a lot of things in there. So if you're gliding in there, you should be extremely careful. You can alternatively just walk into that place, and I would strongly advise being very careful. There's a lot of densely packed monster clusters in there, and there's quite a lot of them. It's easy to get overwhelmed, and there's those jellyfishes shooting at you on top of things. So it's a bit of a tricky area. It's not that hard to approach it, but if you land in the midst of enemies, it might be tricky to survive at the lower level. There is also one of the first places that you can mine iron near the Shroud route. Might also get a quest for it. So while you're there at this level, you might consider getting some iron. It's not a terrible idea, but again, I would strongly advise being extremely careful. There is a lot of enemies in there. Be careful while traversing it, and be careful while approaching Shroud route, because you can easily get overwhelmed at the lower levels. The next elixir well is southeast of Kindlewastes Ancient Spire, and I personally don't really like it at all. If you want to do it for the sake of completing it, you can always do it, but I would advise you to be extremely careful. I would probably advise you to leave this elixir well for later. There is a lot of things that will cause extreme frustration with a high likelihood for you while delving in that elixir well. First of all, you'll have to get through portions of ruined bridges, and like you have to traverse on those wooden beams between those bridges above shroud magma, shroud lava, and again, if you fall into shroud lava, you're cooked, you're dead. And there's going to be several banshees trying to shoot you down from those ruined bridges. Of course, you can glide there, and it should be, I did it in this demonstration, but you should be extremely careful. I would not advise it. There is a very high likelihood of landing in shroud lava, and while traveling through it, there's two sections of those caves, and you have to dig through some rubble in order to get to the other section of it. And just traversing it on top of Shroud lava can be extremely dangerous because one wrong move, and there's going to be uh, Shroud monsters that will try to shoot you down into it, and you're dead. You should be extremely careful. And once you get into the area where the Shroud root is, there's going to be an extremely annoying fell sickle skitch. And if you're at the level of Kindlewastes and you're not expecting something too terrible to happen to you in there, spoiler alert, that's the terrible thing that's gonna happen to you. That Falsicle Skitch has a lot of attacks that can do tremendous amount of damage. There's not a lot of ways to hide from it. The only valid strategy is going around the cliff where the Shroud Root is and being extremely careful. So I would not advise going there at the level of Kindlewaste. I'd rather advise you to explore everything else, level up, get the game near completion, and then come back for it later. Because at the level of Kindlewaste, it's gonna be extremely frustrating, extremely annoying, and God forbid it will discourage you from playing the game at all. Next, the Shroud route is on the southern part of Kindlewaste's map. It's fairly easy to approach. You can overall glide to that place altogether from Ancient Spire and Kindlewaste. And in the contrast to the previous Elixir Well, it's fairly easy, fairly simple, straightforward Shroud route. Some monsters around it, not too difficult, not too bad, fairly approachable, and you can get in there quite easily. And there's multiple ways that you can get out of the place even if you don't teleport back or out of it. In the demonstration in here, I'm gliding all the way from the Ancient Spire and Kindlewaste. As long as you have a decent glider, and as I mentioned before, there is an opportunity of getting the best glider in the game in Kindlewaste, and I strongly advise it, you should be able to glide to that area or near that area quite easily without any barriers, and it's a fairly straightforward journey. Next Shroud route is on the southernmost border of Kindlewaste's map. There is a high likelihood that you will never get in that area because there's not really any quest or anything that points you in that direction. However, I would advise gliding over the areas that are not covered with the shroud first, and then gliding into there. It's a bit of a journey. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's far away from everything. There's not a lot of interesting stuff in there. So that's the only point of interest. Otherwise, the shroud route, well, it is guarded as always. Nothing way too difficult, nothing too extraordinary. More of an ordinary type of a shroud route that you can glide in and chop down. The next Elixir well is on the western part of Kindlewastes. It's a bit far from Kindlewaste's ancient spire, and I would advise approaching it carefully. You can, of course, try gliding in the shroud, but you can get to the cliffs and then get to the Elixir well. The Elixir well itself is fairly long, and it's kind of an underground cavern. There's the shroud route in the center of it, and you can of course glide in there, but I would advise a more careful approach if you're at lower level. There's nothing too extraordinary in there. There's a banshee, a bunch of zombies, a bunch of enemies, but nothing too extraordinary, nothing too difficult. It's a fairly straightforward elixir well that you can clear and get your shroud route fairly in a fairly straightforward and simple manner. The next elixir well is also on the western side of Kindlewaste. It's northwest of Kindlewaste's ancient spire. It's not too extraordinary. The only thing that's important to mention is there is a bug queen with a lot of bugs in there, and she's higher levels than previous ones. She has a lot of health, and there's a ton of bugs, so you should be prepared for killing that bug queen. Otherwise, it's a fairly straightforward elixir well, same as the previous one. You get there, you kill the bug queen, you chop down the shroud root, and that's it. we're done. There's a lot of bugs in the area and those tiny bug huts which they crawl out from, and it's a bit of a travel from Kindlewaste Ancient Spire, but otherwise it's a fairly straightforward structure, fairly straightforward elixir well, similar to the previous ones. There's not much in it, and Buckwin itself is not the most difficult boss that you will encounter. As long as you have the capacity to deal a lot of damage, it should not be a lot of problem. The next elixir well is at northwestern part of Kindlewaste. The trick is finding it, and I'm showing you exactly the location for the cave entrance, which is quite easy to miss, and it might be tricky to find it. Otherwise, apart of finding that cave entrance, there is nothing too extraordinary for it. You can even glide in there and get to the Shroud route. There's not a lot of enemies, very few shroud enemies, and it's a fairly straightforward get in the cave and get the shroud route encounter. The only thing worth mentioning, both in this cave and in other shrouded areas in Kindleways, are red exploding bugs. You want to detonate them. You want to explode them from some distance because they have the capacity of dealing a lot of damage to you. The first shroud route I'm going to show you in Albaneve Summit is southeast of Albaneve Summit Ancient Spire. It's situated on an island on top of a hill, rock formation, in the Shroud, and it's surrounded by lava, and you have to land near it. There is a fell monstrosity on top of there near the Shroud route. It's a kind of a boss encounter. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. That Fell Monstrosity can do a lot of damage to you. There's a lot of zombies on top of that Fell Monstrosities that you'll have to fight. So I would advise landing on the side of the hill if you possibly can do it, and being very careful because it can be a bit of a difficult encounter when you have to fight a lot of enemies at the same time. And as before, you should be comfortable fighting all levels of encounters before tackling more tricky shroud routes and elixir wells. And both in Albaneve Summit and Veilwater Basin, things gonna get tougher. They're gonna get more difficult. Especially elixir wells will considerably increase in their difficulty in terms of bosses difficulty, and in terms of all the shroud zombies and NPCs difficulty. So you should be prepared for things getting more difficult gradually, and you should be comfortable killing things overall in Albaneve Summit in any area to get that shroud route fairly comfortably. Next shroud route is southwest of Albaneve Summit Ancient Spire, and there's a Felt Underbrood. It's a fairly densely populated cave, and after you get inside of it, there's if you go the normal route and you don't skip it by gliding as I do, because again, like if you see that I landed in there and didn't even get attacked by anything, I would consider it getting lucky. And because I'm higher level, if you go through it normally, you have to kill quite a few enemies, but it's a normal kind of elixir well with nothing too extraordinary, with a felt underbrute in the end. So be prepared for traversing Shroud for a while, for fighting quite a lot of enemies, and felt underbrute in by the end of it. The next Shroud route is northwest of Albaneve Summit Ancient Spire, and it's in Camellia Lake Marble Quarry. It's a bit tricky to find. It's exactly in the quarry itself. The entrance is where I'm showing you, and it's gonna be a little bit of a journey. That cave entrance and the gradual cave that you get after entering it is fairly long, so be prepared for quite a journey, for quite a travel in there, because you have to come across several enemies, you have to defeat them, you have to clear them. Obviously you can glide, but if you're gliding, you're increasing the chances of being overwhelmed by a lot of enemies. There's nothing too extraordinary. There's no super powerful monsters in there. There's just a lot of enemies in there, and it's a lot like an elixir well. And there's this shrouded in the end. The next Shroud route is also northwest of the Albaneve summit ancient spire. It's not way too difficult. There's a bunch of enemies in there. The trick is getting there because keep in mind, Albanese Summit is one humongous mountain. So you have to be careful gliding in there and getting at every specific location. Otherwise, it's a lot like normal Shroud routes. Bunch of enemies near the Shroud route. It's in the Shroud. Be careful not to land on top of it. You can get overwhelmed. Otherwise, I just killed everything from the hill. Like the further I go up the more difficult zones, the more of this strategy I'm using of getting a staff, uh, getting at a considerable range and killing everything from afar, clearing everything, and then getting the shroud root. The next elixir well is northeast of the ancient spire, and there's gonna be quite a journey in order to get there. You will have to get there. There's a quest for that place. There's also Fell Cyclops, and it's one of the most difficult and longest elixir wells. It's not too frustrating, I would say, but it's a fairly long journey just to get there. You'll have to spend quite a lot of time to get there, and without frost resistance, I would definitely not advise getting there without a really, really good frost resistance. So I'd say get as much frost resistance as you can, and you have to get there in order to complete main story quest in any case, and you should be well prepared for the fight with Fell Cyclops. It's packed with enemies all the way. So there's going to be a lot of zombies, there's going to be thunder brutes, there's going to be all kinds of things that you can encounter leading to that elixir well and in the elixir well itself. And the structure of it is more horizontal than vertical. You have to glide around and be careful when gliding because if you do something wrong, again, you fall into shroud lava and you die instantaneously. So you should be very careful gliding around and using the grapple hook. But overall, there's three shroud routes in there, and you get them one after another. There's two small encounters that you have to fight, and the first two, and the third one is defended by Fell Cyclops. Fell Cyclops is something that you should be very prepared for. There's a simple way to do it. I wouldn't call it like an easy way to do it. I wouldn't even call cheesing it, but you might find it useful because that's the way I did it, and that's the way I'm gonna illustrate it in here. There's quite a bit of jumping around, and you'll have to do a lot of gliding, and you have to like use your grappling hook in order to scale, especially the last location with Fell Cyclops. You have to like climb on it in order to get there. And again, I would advise being extremely careful, gliding and using grappling hook and everything like that, because below you there is a lot of times shroud lava. You fall to shroud lava, you will definitely die. There is hardly any way to get out of shroud lava in there because it's at the lowest point, and even if you manage to get out of there, you there's a high likelihood that you'll get stuck in a very very low place from which you cannot get out normally and you have to teleport. So be extremely careful traversing that cave. It can be very dangerous, even if we don't mention the fell cyclops itself. There is a way to kind of cheese the fell cyclops, but I wouldn't even call it cheese. It's like an easy way to do it with no 100% guarantee, because if you do it the same way, and that is standing at the entrance and shooting at him from that entrance, he will run up to you and he'll do either of two things. He's gonna shoot from his eyes a laser beam, which you should be very careful about. It's can be very annoying to dodge. And the second thing, he will probably roar at you and then reset and run back. You should be careful with second thing as well, because if he runs all the way back to where he was, he's gonna reset his health. But that's a sort of a simple way to do it, even though if you want in, you can get inside the room, you have to dodge a lot of his attacks. Overall, that guy is not too fast. It's kind of possible, and well, it's something that you can do. You can avoid his attacks. I would advise being extremely careful with that laser beam from his eye and keep an eye on the floor because sometimes he uses an attack that will explode the floor. It's a bit of a trickier boss encounter, but it's something that you can do. If you're doing the same approach as I do, be careful for him not to reset his house completely because he has a tendency of resetting altogether, and you have to start from the scratch. As a matter of fact, that's what happened to me. Doesn't happen always, but there is something that you should definitely keep in mind. Next Shroud route is northeast of Albaneve Summit Ancient Spire. It's a bit tricky to find. The entrance is at the cave north of the Shroud route itself, and it's in the Shroud. And of course, there's fog everywhere. It can be a little bit difficult to notice, but I'm showing you exactly where it should be, where the entrance should be. I'm showing you the exact location. Otherwise, it's not too difficult. Nothing too extraordinary, fairly straightforward. You get in the cave, you get the shroud root, you chop it down. Fairly straightforward, kind of a hidden cave shroud root. In terms of enemies, once again, be careful with exploding bugs because this time they will explode and deal more damage. And I did glide in there, but you can walk there gradually, you don't have to rush it. There's a lot of enemies here and there, but yeah, exploding bugs is something that will deal more damage and that you should be the most careful about in here and in other areas in Albaneve Summit overall. Next Shroud route is at the northern part of Albaneve Summit. It's very ordinary Shroud route. It's just you have to find it. I would recommend gliding to a hill and then gliding in there. You can always kill the enemies from the distance. If you get near the Shroud route, of course, it's protected by a bunch of enemies. Nothing too extraordinary. The enemies are higher level, so you should be able to kill packs of high level enemies, well, at least high level fall beneath summit without any problems in order to tackle the Shroud route and clear it effectively. Next Elixir Well is northwest of the Ancient Spire. Again, it's pretty far from the Ancient Spire. It's a bit of a journey, so that's a bit of a tricky part getting there in the first place. And second of all, there's going to be another fell Cyclops that you'll have to kill, and it's a bit similar to the one you killed previously, and it's nothing too extraordinary if you get a hang of it. He has the same attacks. If you're gonna get hit by something, it's gonna be his eye beam that does a lot of damage. Otherwise, it's very similar to the previous encounter. Just watch out for the eye beam attacks. Watch out for exploding ground, and yeah, just don't get near him overall, especially if you're playing the ranged class. Of course, you have to get near him as a melee, but I've completed the game as ranged class, and I'm explaining it from that point of view. It's something that you can kill, not too difficult, something you can handle. You should be prepared. You should have decent gear. You should be well geared, well equipped, good frost resistance overall for traveling all across the Albaneve Summit is definitely something you should have on top of everything. Next Shroud route is northwest part of Albaneve Summit. It's between Albaneve Summit and the Veilwater Basin. I'd say you're kind of entering it from Veilwater Basin side. You can get there from Albaneve Summit side, but in other case, it's in the northern part of the map overall, and it's in a cave. Again, those are that's a cave that's gonna be a bit tricky to spot. I'm showing you the exact spot of entrance in there. Fairly straightforward. You get in there, not a big cave. You get the shroud route straight away. A few enemies, nothing way too difficult, nothing over too complicated. A normal hidden cave shroud route. Next shroud route is a bit tricky to get to. It is in Veilwater Basin, at the southern part of it, southeastern part to be precise. And in order to get there, you'll have to get across a castle. And it's sort of kind of a jumping puzzle in there. There is a certain route that you have to follow. You have to get on top of the castle wall in order to traverse the top of the castle. And after you get at the top of the castle, you have to get through certain narrow bridges across Shroud lava, and of course, you should be careful while traversing those bridges because, as we know by now, Shroud lava is extremely deadly. You don't want to get stuck in Shroud lava at any point in time in your life. There's quite a few enemies scattered here and there. They're not too difficult. There's no bosses. There's nothing in there. But if you don't know what you're going for, you're probably gonna miss that castle altogether. Because the trickiest part is getting on top of it, and traversing through the lava is not that difficult. It's not way too difficult. You just have to be careful. And in the area where the shard root itself is, there is several jellyfishes. They will obviously try to kill you. They're not too difficult. Just keep an eye on the sky, and they're floating around that area. And I advise shooting them straight away when you see them, when you get into that area, in order to be able to safely chop down the shroud root. Next shroud root is in a cave at southeastern part corner, I would say, of the map, and there's a high likelihood that that's a place that you're gonna start your journey in Veilwater Basin from, because it's near the tunnel that connects Albaneve Summit and Veilwater Basin. It's near the village of Riverreach, and the trickiest part is that it's in a certain underwater cave. It's the entrance is the underwater cave, and you have to get to the lake at the bottom of that village, and then you have to dive in order to get there. Uh, I'm showing you the exact location of the entrance. You don't really need a lot of water breathing or anything to get in there. There's just a fairly densely packed cave with a shroud route on the other side once you complete the dive, once you swim through it. And overall, it's nothing too extraordinary. It's just obviously they're higher level than Albaneve Summit, and that's something you should be prepared for. The next elixir well is to the east of Veilwater Basin Ancient Spire. It's somewhat similar to that frustrating elixir well in Kindlewastes. There's also a sickle sketch in there. It's also quite a bit annoying. However, it's fairly easy to get to that fell sickle sketch. The layout of the elixir well is fairly straightforward. On top of it, there's a golden chest in that cave, and it's not too bad, even though I would advise and caution, extremely caution you uh, about that fell sickle sketch fight. It can be a bit annoying and a bit frustrating, and you should be very careful because, again, you're fighting it in a confined room. There's not a lot of room to move around, and it can get very annoying. And you should be very, very extremely careful in that fight. It can be quite tricky, and yeah, would I say it's extremely frustrating? Well, it's kind of is. It can be very frustrating if you don't really know exactly what you're dealing for, and I would advise being very prepared for that fight. Very, very prepared. The next Shroud route is east of Veilwater Ancient Spire. It's much simpler. It's a straightforward Shroud route. The only trick is getting there because Veilwater Basin is all about traversing the jungle. There are several things that can annoy you very, very much in the jungle. Specifically, my thing is jumping lizards. I don't really like those jumping lizards, and I would advise you to be careful because there's jumping lizard man that can jump on you from any point in the jungle. They can be really annoying with the jump attack. You should be very careful. On top of that, there's those wasps that spew acid at you, and there are several annoying things that you can find in the jungle. And there's also those lizards that throw things at you. Uh, priest lizards that throw glowing orbs at you, and lizards that throw discs at you. That can be quite annoying as well. Otherwise, you just need to get there and you chop down the shroud root and you're done. The next Elixir well is north from Ancient Spire in Veilwater Basin, and it is a bit tricky. I wouldn't say that it's annoying. It's a bit of a underwater puzzle, and there's gonna be quite a few underwater puzzles that you'll have to do, and this one is the one that I would definitely advise having a diving helmet. And if you want maybe some food as an alternative, that will increase your capacity to hold air under the water, and this will be very important to have in Veilwater Basin overall. And my, of course, I use a diving helmet. This is my preferred thing because stocking a lot of food can be a bit tricky and can take a while the helmet is something that you can use infinite amount of times. Otherwise, there's two buttons you have to press in a certain section of underwater tunnels that go into normal sections of tunnels. There are several enemies, quite a few zombies in there. They're considerably powerful compared to Albaneve Summit. And after you activate those two buttons, you're gonna get in the room with the Shroud route. Be very careful in that room because at one point of time there's gonna be a bunch of zombies that will run into you, that will run your way. There's like 10 to 15 of them, and you'll have to get rid of them. So be very careful in that room. Do not let your guard down until you killed all those zombies in the Shroud Root room. Otherwise, getting the capacity for underwater breathing is something that should be your priority. And I have a tiny bit of a short showing you how to get sushi, which is one of the best underwater breathing foods. However, I would advise using that food in order to get the diving helmet. There is a certain quest chain that you have to do in order to get that helmet, but it's quintessential in a lot of situations because, on top of all of the jumping puzzles, climbing puzzles, and all sorts of lava puzzles, all those kind of stuff that you already have, Veilwater Basin will add a lot of diving puzzles. And this is not the most difficult one. There are far more difficult underwater diving puzzles in Veilwater Basin that have spinning blades that will try to chop you into pieces and everything, and they're way more dangerous overall. So you have to have a considerable underwater breathing capacity for a lot of situations, especially if you want to explore the Veilwater Basin in all of its capacity. And it's right now it is an end game zone. So yes, it is definitely worth exploring all of it. There's quite a lot of legendary chests on top of everything, on top of all the shroud routes and all the things. So yeah, that's something that's worth getting, and it's something that you should have for the end game. And the end game right now is collecting legendary chests. There are several routes of it, there are several ways to get it, but that's where you get the best gear. Of course, I'm not bringing up the construction, which is a different segment of the game, building and everything. I'm talking strictly about itemization right now. The next Shroud route is north of Veilwater Basin Ancient Spire. It's not too difficult. There's Fell Thunderbrood, so there's something you should be aware of, and a lot of shroud tentacles also. They're not really annoying as you don't get near them. They can hit pretty hard if you get somewhere near. And overall, it's a fairly ordinary shroud route. Nothing too complicated. Just a Thunder Brute. If you can handle Thunder Brutes in Veilwater Basin, if you can kill him, this should be just fine and should be fairly normal fight and encounter for you. You won't be able to glide there from the Ancient Spire itself, but in this example, I got on top of the hill and glided in there. But the shrouded area in there is quite approachable from multiple sides. It's fairly straightforward, fairly simple, and fairly easy to get there. And to get out of there, of course, you can teleport, but it's a fairly normal area that you can get to. And this is probably one of the easiest shroud routes in entire Water Basin, and it should not be problematic at all whatsoever in any capacity to get there. The next shroud route is in Cromwell Castle, and to begin with, that's a location which is very hard to get to. Like there are several ways to traverse uh, Veilwater Basin in order to get there. Probably the way developers intended it, getting there from the bottom, going through the village, and getting into the castle. However, in here and overall, I did a very interesting thing, which was gliding from all the way from Albaneve summit near that castle, and I personally put a shrine in there near that castle, onto which I can teleport anytime that I wish. And this is a very good thing to do. And keep in mind that you have to, I would advise climbing as high as you can at that mountain near the castle in order to place that shrine, so you will be able to get there as many times as you wish. And the reason for that, a part of Shroud Root, Elixir Wells, and yada yada yada, is the legendary chests that you can find in the castle. There's essentially one in the castle and another on top of the house in the village, and another one in the church. So there's three chests in there, and there are two legendary chests nearby. This is the most optimized and the best legendary chest farming route that you can find for Veilwater Basin. It's very easy, it's very straightforward. There are several videos of people featuring this route precisely and how you should do it. The only thing that I would add is I would definitely advise having a shrine near that castle as high as you can, so you can glide on top of that roof in the village and in the castle itself in order to get those chests and farm them efficiently. The thing that's worth mentioning in a specific case of Shroud Root is you have to activate two buttons. They're on the balconies, as I'm showing on both sides of the throne room. Once you activate those buttons, you get through the gates, you have to descend, and then gonna be two spider-like jumping things that you have to kill one at a time. They're not too difficult. You can fairly easily kill them. They're kind of mini boss ish, but otherwise it's not too difficult. Just you just have to solve the bottom puzzle in order to get there. That's the same. The next elixir well is northwest of the ancient spire in the Veilwater Basin. Again, you're gonna have a fell sickle sketch in there, and something that you should be very careful about is the lake near the shroud route. In there, you can accidentally fall into that lake while moving around in the boss fight. So that's something you should be careful with. And again, you have a confined room, you have Falsicle Sketch. It's a tricky fight. It's can be very tricky to do. Probably, but potentially, melee classes might have it easier. I haven't tried it as a melee, so it's hard to tell. But as a ranged, I would say it's something that can be quite frustrating, and it's something that you should be prepared for, both mentally and in terms of your character progression. So don't rush in there. it can be tricky. Be careful. It can be quite frustrating. That fight can be quite frustrating indeed. Next, Shroud Route is in northwestern part of the map. Keep in mind that the enemies in there are of the highest level, and it's going to be the most difficult part of the map overall. And again, once again, you're gonna get the Felsicle skites, skitch, like tomato, doesn't matter. I think you'll figure out what I'm talking about. In any case, that is slightly easier because you can move around a lot. It's under open air, it's not in a confined space, and there's a lot more possibilities of killing that thing. And in the video, I'm gliding right into the shroud route. I would not advise doing that. I would advise approaching it from the side in order to kill that fell sickle sketch. Anyway, uh, so yeah, you have to get rid of it. There are several ways to do it, but if you fought it previously, it should not be anything new for you at all whatsoever. There's also a banshee on top of it, but banshee is not as annoying as that one. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward. Once you clear it, you chop down the shroud root and you're done. As a bonus, I'm adding 3 locations in Blackmire where you can also find shroud roots. First one is north of a giant tree, and it's in the shroud. It's another shroud cavern with shroud root, similar to the ones we've seen previously. You'll just have to be careful, as always, to look exactly for the entrance. In the video, I'm showing precisely where it is. You just get in there, you get till the end of the cave, and you get the Shroud Route in there. Not too many enemies, not way too difficult. If you can handle most things in Blackmire, it should be fine for you. Next Shroud Route is also in a cave. It's southwest of the Ancient Spire, and again, it's one of those Shroud Routes that are in the cave. It's in the Shroud. You have to look carefully to find it. Again, I'm giving you the precise location for it. For the entrance of the cave, just look carefully. It's probably covered with fog and all the terrain that makes it hard to notice, but you should be able to find it. It's fairly straightforward journey into that cave, and by the end of it, you get the Shroud Route. Nothing too extraordinary, just another Shroud Route in the cave, and there's plenty of those that I've covered previously. The last Shroud Route is probably in the one of the longest caves that you'll find in the game. And the thing that I would advise is to always move downwards in that cave. There's a lot of passages and there's a lot of ways to get lost in that cave. I would definitely advise and emphasize picking up the passage that will lead you downwards. And once you descend to the bottom of it, there's going to be a passageway, a sort of a natural bridge that will have the shroud route on the other side of that passage. So it's a very very tricky cave. You should be very careful. Just try to descend all the time. I'm showing you the route, even though it might be hard to follow because, again, it's shroud covered. Everything is kind of blurry and it looks the same. But the main advice I would give you is to always follow it downwards, descend, descend, descend. And as mentioned before, you should have sufficient time for traveling in the shroud, especially if you have any kind of potential of getting lost in the cave. You should have plenty of time to get in there and get out of it. At least getting in there, because you can always teleport out of the area that was cleared by destroying the shroud route, but getting in there is a hard part, and you should always have plenty of time in order to get to the shroud route itself. But that's all of the shroud routes and elixir wells you can find. And this will the whole point of it is getting a tremendous amount of skill points that you can invest in your skill trees. Especially it becomes important once you have gathered some really great gear and you're looking for ways to upgrade your character even further. And obviously there's going to be plenty more content, and by completing all the shroud routes and elixir wells and all of it, you're going to have an extremely powerful character no matter which specialization you will choose, whether you want to play a mage, an archer, or a melee warrior, or a rogue, or even a healer. Having a lot of skill points is definitely something very useful in any case. I hope you found this video useful. Give it a like and subscribe for more Enshrouded and Conan Exiles content.